no matter what story you tell, doesn't affect the truth of what you are. And this is the same as when you go to sleep at night and you have a dream. You can have any dream you want, but it does not affect the reality of what you are. As you're dreaming, the reality of what you are is just laying there in bed and nothing's actually happening to you. But in the dream, you don't know that you're dreaming and you buy into the dream and you really think it's happening. So much so that I could come along in your dream and say, hey, you're dreaming. And as you're dreaming, not knowing you're dreaming, you say, no, this is real. I understand that it looks real. I understand that it feels real, but you're dreaming. And in a way, that's the invitation of spirituality, is to wake up from that dream. It is a collective social hypnosis to believe that our emotions are responding to something out there. And it's fascinating to see on a societal level when you have two polar opposite emotional extremes from two different groups, each of which adamantly believe they're responding to reality in their emotions. And that's just not how it works. And the more we think that's how it works, the more polarized you get in your perspective, which is also to create further separation. It really is a hypnosis. It's wild. And the more polarized you are in your view, the less you want to hear that. Here's the question you are invited to ask yourself. Am I responding to what is, or am I responding to my imagination about what is? Because I can promise you, any emotional elation or emotional disturbance that never responds to reality, that only responds to our imagination about reality, what we turn things into. And it's so fascinating because you can watch the whole world respond emotionally, thinking they're responding to reality. Which is also funny because I posted something about this online and naturally it created a bit of a reaction. But yet the emotional responses I got, people don't see that their emotions are responding to their interpretation of what I'm writing. And it's so obvious that they don't hear what I'm saying and what I'm writing. They're turning it in to mean something that isn't the intended meaning. So it's just like a further example on top of an example. To be so adamant in the belief that your emotional response to what I'm writing is about what I'm writing rather than it's about what you're turning it into, which ultimately is to imagine an attack in my writing, and it's just not that. What are we trying to get away from? I'll tell you, we're trying to get away from our thoughts about it. And the more you think that what you're trying to get away from is the outside, you imprison yourself to the outside. You are effectively saying the outside has the power to affect my inner sacred life. And of course, with that comes this sort of rage against the outside, which then tries to violently control the outside. And the violence is subtle. It's fascinating that we don't see that. And that's where we become blinded. The illusion of what we think we're seeing looks so real that this energetic buildup happens on the inside that just overtakes you. And I guess I'll also say, if you want to understand the mechanism of emotion, get radically honest with yourself about the difference between what you actually know and what you think you know. And if you're basing it on anything that somebody else has told you, you don't know that. And even if you base it on what you assume to be your objective view, it is wildly filtered through conditioning. Even with what somebody says, you're not experiencing what somebody says, you're experiencing your interpretation of what they say. Again, to listen to what anyone says and to have an emotional response, emotions do not respond to reality. They respond to perception. They respond to how you are perceiving something. And the more painful the emotional response, the more out of alignment the perception is with what's true. And I understand that might not seem clear. This is why such things can take time to marinate and really see. Sometimes one sentence about it just isn't enough. Another question I like to ask myself is, in this emotional disturbance, what am I protecting? And the mind will have its story about what it's protecting. And it will protect itself by projecting that reason outside, when really what it's about is protecting the ego structure. And it's so fascinating how subtle that can be, which is also to say it's so fascinating how crafty the ego is in the narratives it tells to shift the blame and project it outward. And to really see these things takes a real stillness of heart and radical self-honesty. And it's scary to get that honest, because when you dive into that honesty, you start to see a lot of things that you don't really want to see, which is what I will call the disappearance of everything. It's like when you get honest about what you really know and what you're pretending to know, you start to realize just how much you don't know. And that can be terrifying for the one who builds their sense of foundation based on what they think they know, because then that foundation of security starts to evaporate. Like everything I'm holding on to gain a sense of grounding starts to disappear. And that can be very scary. And in our terror of that, we will just cling more tightly to what we think we know. And what's also fascinating is, this is really where the proverbial rubber meets the road, right? Because you can look at these spiritual insights, and in so many instances, we can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then when it touches a certain point that really threatens the ego, even though you don't see that's what's happening, then all that spiritual insight goes out the window. It's like, oh, I can see it everywhere else, but no, not this, not this. And then if you give it a week, a month, a year, a decade, you look back and it's like, oh, it was the same thing. Yeah. The spiritual truth, it's not just true on the weekends, right? It's not like a hobby of truth. Like, oh, that's cute, I see how that works. And then you think the practicality of your everyday life is somehow more real than the spiritual truth. And of course, that's when it becomes more threatened, when you encounter situations that seem to threaten the reality of your life, but it's not threatening the reality of your life. It's threatening the reality of your imagined life, which is perceived to be real. And that's when the defensiveness comes in and throws out the wisdom and goes into this survival mode. Alice asks me, what do I think about the quote, "There's no truth, only perception"? In the mind, that's true. There is no truth in the mind. Even your facts are not truth. You see, my friends, I always say this every time. Spirituality is an invitation to discern the difference between imagination and reality, and live in reality and surrender the imagination. Surrender meaning acknowledge its non-reality, which is to give up everything you think, because everything you think isn't true. As it relates to what is true and what is real, truth and reality are synonymous. Truth equals what is real. Now, the mind's idea of truth is a sentence, right? Like, this sentence is true or it's not. And that's a very human relative form of truth. And from a practical standpoint, that's fine. It can help you navigate. But if that is your North Star for what you base your foundation on, it's going to be wildly insecure. Because as it relates to what is real, only now is real, right? Like, in this moment right now, this is what's real. Therefore, this moment right now is what is true. Now, in this moment of right now, you can imagine 10,000 things that are not here right now. And again, you can even imagine things that you think are here right now, but those things are only happening in your imagination. This is where it gets kind of tricky. There's a very clear line between imagination and reality. And for the one who lives their life from the mind, they often have a very difficult time discerning the difference. They don't see that as they're in this moment right now, there is a presence, there is a state of beingness that comes before the mind moves. And that state of being is so infinitely more real than anything that comes from the mind. And you see, the whole dilemma in being human is to be captured by the mind's content and to assume that what the mind is thinking is true, and then you're living from the mind's content. You're responding to the mind's content as if it's true. It's like your life before this moment right now is imaginary. Like, when you think about your life, what you're thinking about is a particular perspective that isn't actually here right now. Do you see this? It's like you have this idea of your life, your past, and then that idea is brought into this moment, assumed to be true, and then you live from that idea as if it's real, as if it's true. But it's a particular perspective. It's a way of seeing. It's a story being told that is assumed to be true. And again, this assumption of it being true is what the ego structure relies on for its sense of grounding. But of course, this is why it's constantly unstable, because it's not true. And so in order to solidify it, in order to maintain that sense of grounding, we have to constantly be thinking about it to keep it alive. This is what we do with the ego structure, is that we are constantly thinking about who we think we are in order to survive the idea of ourselves. This is why the ego structure is constantly taking things personally as a way of surviving its own narrative. The ego structure looks at everything that appears to be going on and makes it about itself in order to keep thinking about itself, which is to survive that character. And again, the alternative is to see the non-reality of this ego structure, in which your whole world disappears. And that is terrifying. It's terrifying the more you believe it's what you really are. And again, as you discern the difference between imagination and reality, and you see the non-reality of who you think you are, it becomes easier to let it go. And understand, this insight, this discovery is not for the whole world. It's only for the one who's ready to see it. And this is why there's, even the playful hesitation to even talk about these things publicly, because not everyone is ready to see that. And for the ones who aren't ready to see this, it just massively distorts what I'm saying and turns it into something that it's not. It's like spirituality is a hobby. Spirituality is an accessory. Spirituality is the socially cool thing to do. It's like an outfit that you put on. There's not a real soulful longing to connect with what's really true. Spirituality is used as just another human accessory to help build the character. But spirituality, in its most authentic sense, is the absolute surrender of who you think you are. And that's not necessarily a fun thing, but it's a true thing. And people find their way there as they explore the landscape of being human, chasing illusions, seeing that it's not working, that it's just not going anywhere. And in that, there's the inquiry of, wait, what's really going on? And that's spirituality. Like, I am so ready to surrender everything that I think I want. I'm ready to surrender everything I think I know, because it's not leading towards what I'm really looking for. Right? You have to exhaust yourself in the world. You have to exhaust yourself in this political charade in order to come to a place that's ready to wake up from it. You see this, you can totally exhaust yourself trying to capture it, trying to make real the way you want it to be, all of which is just happening in the imagination, and you never find any real sense of grounding. You never find your way back to real peace and freedom. You see, that's the illusion in the world, right? Like, if only the world was how I want it to be, then I could feel free, then I could be at peace. If only this wasn't happening and we could have this happening, then I could relax. Again, all of this is going on in the mind. We are captured by an illusion that says the outside has power over me. And what you think is the outside is simply your imagination about the outside. But we don't see that. We look at our imagination of the outside and we adamantly believe it's the outside. You know what this is like, and I've talked about this before. You go to a cinema, like take this journey with me. You go to the cinema, imagine you're there all by yourself. What's the situation here? You are looking at a blank white canvas. And then there is a projector in the back that puts a story, an image, onto the blank canvas. Now look what's happening here. You have a blank canvas, and then you have a projector that puts something onto the canvas. Now, as the projector is looking at the canvas, what it sees is a projection, a story. Now, as it looks at the projection, it says, look, it's happening out there. It says, I'm separate from what I'm seeing. But what the projector doesn't realize is that what it is seeing is coming from inside the projector. But the projector has a decent argument because it's saying, look, it's out there. It doesn't see that what it's looking at is coming from its inside. And furthermore, what's really there is a blank canvas. A blank canvas that is holding space for you to project whatever is on the inside so that you can see what exists on the inside. That's the whole experiment that's taking place here, is that reality is a blank canvas where you are projecting the inside of what you are so you can see what exists within, which gives you an opportunity to clarify your perception, to clarify everything that's happening on the inside of you. And everything you see in this life, you're seeing your inside. And again, I understand the argument that says, no, look, it's out there. And I'm separate from it, right? There's me, and then there's this out here. And it's so wild to me that we don't see that this out here is this. And that projection is coming from the mind. The movie that you're watching is the imagination. Even though from one perspective, it looks like you're watching something that's real, but it's just a projection. And anything you put on the canvas doesn't affect the canvas. Any movie, it doesn't matter what's happening in the movie. It doesn't affect the canvas. As soon as you shut the movie off, the canvas remains as it always has been. It simply doesn't matter what the movie was. And this is also to say that the truth of what you are is untouched by your projection. This is also to say or point that the truth of life is unconcerned about your projection because your projection does not affect reality. Therefore, reality lets you project whatever you project, which is also to say there's no judgment, which is also to say there's no fear, because what you project cannot affect reality. No matter what story you tell doesn't affect the truth of what you are. And this is the same as when you go to sleep at night and you have a dream. You can have any dream you want, but it does not affect the reality of what you are. As you're dreaming, the reality of what you are is just laying there in bed and nothing's actually happening to you. But in the dream, you don't know that you're dreaming. and you buy into the dream and you really think it's happening. So much so that I could come along in your dream and say, hey, you're dreaming. And as you're dreaming, not knowing you're dreaming, you say, no, this is real. I understand that it looks real. I understand that it feels real, but you're dreaming. And what happens is in the dream, you're suffering over what you think is real that's not really real. And in a way, that's the invitation of spirituality, is to wake up from that dream. And of course, this is the other pointer that spirituality is attempting to communicate, is that you never suffer over reality. You can only suffer over your dream. So spirituality says, wake up to reality. But in order to wake up to reality, you have to let go of the dream. You can't have both. You can't have your dream and reality. You can't have your dream as a real something to hold on to. You can have your dream knowing that it's a dream, and then that dream becomes more playful. And this is the playful opportunity we have as human beings. It's not so much to wake up from the dream and then not engage. It's to wake up from the dream and know it's a dream. You know what it's also like? It's like going to a movie and realizing or remembering, oh, it's just a movie. Right? For me, this is the political shit show. Oh, it's just a dream. It's just a story unfolding. And as with all stories or projections, they are there as a learning mechanism to see something more deeply. And whatever is being projected needs to be projected. There's nothing that's projected that is without purpose, right? If it's your inside being exposed, there's so much purpose behind that. And none of it is random or incoherent. It's all very intentional. Again, the way that this is designed is extraordinary, right? It's so easy to assume that this life is somehow random, that this is somehow an accident, which is just a particular way of perceiving it. It's a story to tell about it. And you can say the same thing about when you walk into a forest and you see what the mind sees as chaos, and you take a step back and you see the whole thing and you're like, oh, wow, this is a divine symphony. In the appearance of these 10 billion things in the forest that are seen and not seen, the mind can say, what a mess, but it's not. The mind cannot comprehend the depth of interconnectedness between the 10,000 things, which are all really just one thing. One thing that is happening so that this miracle of life can be the miracle of life, which also brings with it an opportunity for the human being, which is to wake up and see something extraordinary. We can say to see something divine. And it's so comical and understandable and adorable that as human beings, we live our lives somewhat oblivious to this symphony that's unfolding, because we're lost in our dream that it's a mess. And we're trying to manage the mess, right? We're trying to clean up the mess as if it's really a mess. Could you imagine that, going into the forest and you start trying to stand up the trees that fell down? You try and get the bugs to stop fighting. You try and organize the forest in a way that it's clean and orderly and you have straight lines everywhere. Separate the rocks from the grass. Clean up all the mud. try and make it look how you think it should look so that you could be at peace, rather than taking a step back and realizing, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, so that the forest can be the forest. And the more I exhaust myself trying to make it nice and orderly, all I'm doing is getting in the way and exhausting myself. But you see this, right? You see how you can adamantly believe that the trees should not fall down, that the leaves should not fall. So let's clean them up and get some glue and put them back on the tree. And as silly as that is, I assume you can see the potential belief in such a thing, a belief in the idea that you know how it should be, because you don't see the bigger picture. And in your belief of how it should be, you start judging and criticizing everything that's not doing what you think it should do, so that you can have the outcome that you imagine is the right outcome, exhausting yourself in the process. Imagine to step back and see, oh my, life knows what it's doing here. Life did not create this so that I could come in and fix it. Life created it so that I can sit back and be fascinated by the miracle I'm swimming in, which is only to invite a tremendous overflow of gratitude and love and deep appreciation for the majesty you see before you. So difficult to see when you are wrapped up in a quest to protect your ego. That's not even a real something. And understand, the world may never see this, and that's fine. Everyone will see it to the degree that they're ready to see it, and the degree that they're ready to see it is the perfect amount for them to see. Right? We all are waking up along a relative scale. Right? Somebody starts here in their journey of awakening, and through their life, their opportunity or purpose is to go here. Right? And for another person, they start here and their journey is to go here. Do you see all the different directions of awakening along a relative scale? But yet your mind can have an idea that's projected on everyone and says, no, everyone should go here. Everyone should become this. Everyone should see this, as if you know, rather than just focusing on your own journey, which is the only thing you have a chance of seeing clearly. You can't see other people's journey clearly, which is such a beautiful invitation to stop focusing on what you imagine to be other people's lives, which is just a fantastic way of avoiding the opportunity to get honest about your own journey. This is what the ego does, is it puts its focus on other people. So concerned about other people's journey, and if only they were how I wanted them to be, which again is to give an immensity of power to that something that you perceive that's outside of you, which is to give your power to nothing, because there's nothing out there. There's just your projection. It's like you're cutting yourself off from your power through an innocent misunderstanding about how all this works. Alice asks, Tiger, would you say if we only put horror movies in the projector, we will think the world is filled with horror? Yeah. Yeah. You will see in the world whatever you put there. You see, this is the beautiful thing. Let me say this quote, and it's something that I've said often. The world wakes up when you wake up. What you are seeing in the world is a reflection of where you are. So if you see the world as almost awake, who are you talking to? If you see the world as going to shit, who are you talking to? What are you seeing? And for the one who wakes up, they see that the world is already awake, which again, returning to the forest analogy, if you wake up in the forest, you see the perfection of the forest and nothing changed in the forest. The forest remains as it always has been. But you see the confusion. The mind projects an image of an awake forest, which is an organized forest where trees don't fall down anymore, and says, if only we can make it like my image, then the world will wake up, which is the exact same thing you're doing to yourself. Dear self, if only you were like this and not like that, then you could wake up, which is also like saying, then I could love you. It's all a reflection. You can't escape that. And the more you see that you can't escape it, once again, you release the world. And you see that this is all between you and you. Which is also to say, this is all about the relationship you have with yourself, which is also to say, this is all about how you see yourself, which is a journey to see yourself more clearly, to see the truth of what you really are. Peter asks, what if other people's actions affect my life? Now it's not just a projection, unless, Peter, you want to see that your life is a projection. People don't affect you, they affect who you think you are, which is really them not affecting who you think you are. It's you telling a story that other people are affecting who you think you are. And let me see if I can draw an illustration. Here's a perfect example from my own life a few weeks ago. In one way, you can say that I got scammed out of thousands of dollars. And I can tell a story that this other person affected my life. Their actions affected my life because they stole thousands of dollars from me. Now, let's break this down. What's really going on here? Okay, look at the energy of upset that might arise in me, which would lead toward seeing them with unloving eyes. Here's what I have to ask myself if I'm bothered by that. What am I really bothered by? It's so obvious to me that I'm not responding emotionally to the reality of circumstance. I'm responding to what I think it means, right? Like to have, in appearances, less money in my bank account, which is a number on a screen. What does that mean? What does it mean? Do you see that it doesn't mean anything until I give it meaning? And I'm responding to the meaning, which is I'm responding to my creation. And if I'm unaware of this, then I will blame the other person for the meaning that I give it. I will say, what you did made me create this meaning. And that's not true. Nobody has the power to force me to perceive a particular way. So their actions do not create my emotional disturbance. Only I have the power to do that. And furthermore, the more I blame them as the cause of my inner world, I am effectively saying that I am powerless and they have my power. Which also comes with a perspective that judges, condemns, criticizes them, withholds love from them, which is something that I feel. Do you see this? The lack of love that I'm giving to them, I'm not really giving to them. I'm giving to myself. Do you see the illusion that thinks I'm giving it to them? But who's the one that feels it? I do. Again, it's a mirror. Everything you think you're giving to others, you're giving to yourself. And furthermore, the more you give a lack of love, indicates how much you're not seeing the truth of things. Which in some way it could be said, this doesn't mean what I think it means. And furthermore, the more I think it means what I think it means, the more I am tying my worth and value to the things in the world, which is just to my imagination. Right? For example, like if I am now thousands of dollars short, if I'm emotionally disturbed by that, I'm tying my worth and value to this silly thing that we call money. And furthermore, that just creates a spiraling effect of getting more lost in the illusion. Like imagine this, if I become emotionally destroyed because I got scammed, do you see how that starts to affect the next moment and the next moment and the next moment? Rather, if I see it as a playful unfolding, a playful learning opportunity, do you see how that affects the next moment and the next moment and the next moment? Do you see the divergence that happens here? The more I get lost in the illusion, I spiral downward and continue to project a movie that goes further and further away from my power. But the more that I see that this is all created on the inside and it's a playful learning opportunity, I go in a completely different direction that reconnects with my power. Which is actually quite funny because in the journey through that experience, it actually inspired me to go out and make more money. Which was fascinating. In a way, and I can't really know this, but in a playful way of saying, because that experience happened, I went out and made 4 or 5 times more than I lost. Because of, let's say, how inspiring that was. And this is, the thing about my job is I get to go and have my human experience, which sometimes includes getting scammed, and seeing the profound nature of what's really happening, and that it inspires me to write about it and to talk about it. Because it's fascinating. Which is to add value to the world. And then that value comes back in the form of money in many other ways. Do you see this? It's like there's what happens, then there's your interpretation, which takes you on a particular journey or a path. It's almost the simplicity of asking, is this a problem or an opportunity? right? When you look at the actions of others and how you think it affects your life, do you see this as a problem or is it an opportunity? And it's neither. It's whatever you want to see, and how you see it will dictate how the movie plays out. This is your power. It doesn't matter what happens, you get to create what happens. And the more you know you're creating what happens, then the more you will lean in the direction of love. The more you think somebody else is creating it, the more you lean in the direction of fear and separation, which leads to more pain, which is a pain that's trying to wake you up to the reality that you're creating it. Isn't this wild? And you see, to see these things, at least for me, and sharing my perspective about it all, when I see how much this is happening on the inside, I let go of the world. Because it's so obviously not happening out there. I let go of other people because what I'm experiencing is not happening from other people. It's all a mirror that shows me what's happening on the inside of what I am so that I can clarify what I see and bring it more in alignment to what's true, which has a dramatic impact on the quality of my inner life, which in some way is the only life. The more I take care of the inner life, then the outer life simply reflects the inner life. Most people are trying to affect their inner life by changing the outer life. It doesn't work that way. Which is so beautiful because it shows me I can let go of the world, I can let go of other people, and I can just focus on healing my perception, bringing clarity to confusion, which is another form of just being deeply honest with myself about my direct experience and taking radical accountability for what I perceive. And that has the most beautiful impact on what appears to be my outer life, to the point where I don't need to worry about my outer life. I don't need to worry about the future, because the future will simply be a reflection of my capacity to see the truth of things, which is what I'm learning to do better right now. So right now is what matters. Do you see this? The only thing you're going to see in the future is your capacity to see what's true. Right? In some way, we can ask ourselves, what do we want in the future? And for simplicity's sake, we want peace and freedom. Okay. Are you going to see peace and freedom? Or do you think your peace and freedom is determined by how things appear to be? Which is funny, because how things appear to be is how you see them. And the only way you're going to bring healing and allow yourself to see peace and freedom is to deal with right now. Is to deal with where those things appear to be lacking and clarify your perception so that you can see you already have it right now. This is like the example of abundance, right? This is so funny. There's no thing in reality called lack. And in the absence of lack, there's only abundance. And if you can see the truth of what you are, which is incredibly abundant, you live from the perception of abundance, which will only give you the experience of abundance in the future, because you see it as so. And to see lack, comically, is to only see your imagination of lack. And if you see lack now, what are you going to see in the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment? When you associate lack and abundance with the world of form, you are giving your power to experience abundance to the world of form, which then you become a prisoner to the world of form. And it's never sustainable, which is why the things you collect in this life will never be enough. Because it's not a real something. There's no reality in the world. The world is a projection of mind. And again, I understand these things that I say. My apologies if they sound like riddles. I don't intend them to be. To me, I'm simply pointing to something that is so deeply true. And sometimes the mind has a difficult time seeing its way there. There's so much noise. Like in this moment right now, my goodness, what is missing? Do you see how anything that you think is missing is just an idea of something missing? To get out of your mind and get in touch with the reality of this moment, what you are is incredibly whole and complete. Incredibly whole and complete. Nothing's missing. That's abundant. Look out into nature. Ask yourself what's missing. Nature is incredibly abundant. Are you not this nature? Or do you tie your worth and value up into worldly things that you can count, which then is trying to count your value, which counts infinitely? My goodness, you guys, what an opportunity that we have to see things more clearly, which results in reuniting with everything you crave. And it's so true to say, everything you really, really, really want, you already have. You just don't see it. You're looking for it where it's not, which is to say, you're looking for it in the world, which is also to say, you're looking for it in the mind, and there's nothing real in the mind. It's all imaginary. You're looking for something real in the imagination, which is why it's so impossible to find, which is why sometimes it looks like you found it, but then it slips away because it's not real. It's not true. What you're really looking for is the truth of what you are, because in the truth of what you are, you have everything that is real. All else is imaginary, which is wild. Life has given you everything that is real, where nothing real is missing. Wild. So go and see that nothing's missing, see that you're whole and complete, and then go play. And what does it look like to go play? It's going to be different for everyone. In some way or another, it's like saying, go love on people. Go let your light shine in the world. It's a completely different life, is it not? It's like you wake up to the playground that is life. that allows you to sing and dance and sharing your heart with all that you see, which is like a form of worship, celebrating the miracle we're all swimming in, holding space for others who get lost and confused, and you tell them, I love you anyway, because I don't need you to be a certain way. Completely different life. And the world will think you've gone mad. Right? Like, to live unbothered by the world, those bothered in the world will think you've gone mad. This is serious. You need to take this seriously. This is real. Okay. It's like waking up and realizing that death isn't really death. There is no such thing as death. But yet those who believe in death, death is a serious thing, and you need to take it seriously too. There's people dying, really dying, as if dying is something that actually happens to you, which is funny because dying doesn't really matter for the one who died. It only matters for those around watching someone die, because they get a reflection of how they see death, and it scares the shit out of them because they believe in it.